got Freedom Convoy. I always call him an intern because on his LinkedIn profile, it's written intern right next to Freedom Convoy. But I guess key persona, key figure, Tom Marazzo. Tom, how are you doing?
There's only a 60% chance you're right about what you're saying, according to the OPP's analysis.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's better to say there's a 60% chance that people will follow you and agree with you.
Right.
I think that's what it is. Tom, for people just tuning in now for the first time, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Oh boy. I'm a co-host on Rebel News as of the last 5 or 6 weeks, and you're a really good opening act. I just want to say that. No, I, for people that don't know me, I did participate with the convoy last January, February. And my role during the convoy did evolve from starting off with the intent just to deliver soup. That's the inside joke, which turned out to be doing some media stuff, but also participating in some of the negotiations with the city of Ottawa, and also spending a lot of time talking to the police, both the OPS and the OPP.
Yeah, and I think I saw you in the stand basically almost all day today watching the commission. I think that you followed pretty closely. As someone watching it, what was your general view of what happened? How are you feeling looking at this show going on?
You know, I have to say, I think that was the hardest day that I've actually sat through. I first and foremost, I listened to these people, you know, the Deputy Minister of Finance, the National Security Advisor to Justin Trudeau, and I listened to these people, and I'm not sure they're talking about Canadian tax-paying voters, or if they're talking about enemies of the state in a different country. Like I can't comprehend for the life of me why week after week we've been here in this commission, and we have always heard the evidence and the testimony from various law enforcement as well as CSIS, and yet these people continuously, from the political class and the political appointees, get up there day after day after day and just lie about the same exact talking points. It is just, it's hard to digest. It's hard to accept the fact that they're actually talking about Canadian citizens. You know, it's, you can see their disdain for people that have wrong think, that they disagree with. And, you know, an important thing is in the testimony today, yet again, another high-ranking set of government officials still can't tell us when the convoy protest became illegal or why.
Well, the only thing that could make it illegal is the fact that the Emergencies Act was enacted. There was no riot act before that. Do you mirror Tom's feelings about what went on today?
Oh, for sure. You know, and I totally agree with you. I think I forget during this proceeding exactly why we're here most of the time, because a lot of the things that we talk about aren't very relevant anymore, at least in my opinion. Like, yeah, we're getting down to the bottom of it, but again, there's no evidence suggesting that it was ever necessary to invoke the Emergencies Act. So you're right. It sounds like this prosecution on these Canadians, on Canadian patriots, on Canadian soil is getting to the point where I really think that all of these high-ranking government officials, so to speak, just live in their own bubbles, and they have no actual grasp of the reality around them, and that they just have people talking in their ears, feeding them their information. And I think that those people have they've sort of allowed those people to project their own realities, because I don't think that you can actually sit there and provide a testimony so false so many times and have the same rhetoric, the same dialogue. Like, I know that lawyers go through like a little bit of a preparation with their clients beforehand, but when you have so many pieces of the federal arm or the federal government, so to speak, that just say the same things, they use the same words. It's frightening to think that we live in a country where the people that are supposed to protect us haven't done a thing to uphold that in the last 2 years.
You know, put it into another context too. For the entire time of COVID, none of these people lost their jobs.
Exactly.
None of these people were prevented from traveling.
Yeah.
None of these people were prevented from any of the freedoms that they had prior to COVID. They still went about their daily lives in this country. And last April, the federal government gave themselves a 20% taxpayer funded raise. They decided for themselves that they were entitled to a 20% raise last April. And what did the rest of the those who chose not to partake in a medical experiment, what did they have to endure? We don't hear about that. We talk about in this commission, poor Ottawa, poor residents. Well, guess what? Before Eva and Keith went in for the Horn injunction, they had 100 affidavits from local residents saying that they supported the convoy. So they went in, right? We have local support. Many people in the city of Ottawa that I personally met during the convoy supported the convoy, and they were all from the city of Ottawa. We have a very small handful of people that, I'm sorry, but poor you had to endure. And guess what? Every year in this city, you've got festivals of varying kinds. You've got Canada Day celebrations. I think there's a blues fest here that goes on for weeks. Like there's a lot of activity in the city. But I'm sorry that you were inconvenienced for a couple of horns for a couple of days. Oh boy, we better, have the War Measures Act, 2.0 invoked to clear people out.
Well, it's actually a couple of days that you just said. I think a lot of people see the convoy as something that went on for 4 weeks, and that's right.
Yeah.
But the honking was only there for the first few days because afterwards you had an injunction.
That's right.
And just to go back to today, to today's proceedings at the commission, one of the most interesting moments that we saw from the commission today was when Brendan Miller ended his cross-examination of the second witness of the day, Jody Thomas, is clip 11. And he asked an extremely relevant question at the end. And in all fairness to Jody Thomas, she was actually providing yes or no answers. Yes, she would go on, she would ramble for a while, but she would always say yes or no, right? So at least 90% of the time, she would still say yes or no. And this no that she gave at the end was extremely relevant.
What if they just got rid of your position and left it to the director of CSIS to do what you do?
So the director of CSIS is not the only person who is responsible for security in this country. That's number one. You can certainly make that recommendation to the governor and council if it's useful to you, but there are more people than him involved in assessing national security in this country.
But it's nothing passed by Parliament, right? Parliament.
The Privy Council office is an established office that is essentially the Prime Minister's department. We coordinate information, we challenge, we provide policy advice to the Prime Minister, and I am part of that mechanism.
I understand that, but you can agree that Parliament has given you no mandate to do that with respect to intelligence.
I don't agree with how you framed it.
Parliament? So
I don't agree with the basic premise of your challenge.
Well, here you go, yes or no. Has Parliament, via statute, given you, the National Security Advisor and the Privy Council, authority to collect and then analyze intelligence?
The Foreign Intelligence and Assessment Group is a longstanding group that no, Parliament hasn't given it authority, but it exists and it continues.
Exactly. She was not giving authority to do such a thing. So if she wasn't given authority to do such a thing, why didn't she rely on the agencies like CSIS that had authority to do such a thing? No?
Well, yeah, the clip explains it perfectly. I mean, she dug that hole herself. Brendan was like, here's the shovel. And she was like, absolutely. Let me get to work on that. Show you another thing that I don't know and that I'm incompetent for. I just love how he just closes his laptop prematurely because he knows exactly what they're going to say. Like he picks and chooses his moments. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Apart from Brendan, it was really hard to watch again, to be honest.
Well, I mean, you break it down in another way. She talks about foreign intelligence gathering and analysis and all that kind of stuff, but he was really trying to get at, what about domestic? And her response really, from what I was listening to, I was kind of surprised. She's like, well, I'm actually trying to get more power and control to do domestic stuff, right? And but he said, well, you actually don't have any authority to do what you're doing anyway. That falls under the purview of CSIS. And what I found even more interesting was when they were talking about Section 2 of the CSIS Act, she really challenged Brendan on his interpretation of the thing and said that CSIS has a very narrow scope for looking at that. And it's like, it's kind of there in black and white. It either is or it isn't.
Yeah.
You can't kind of say that it's not. And he went through the entire law enforcement, intelligence, and CSIS apparatus, RCMP, CSIS, the comms people, the signal intelligence people, and even he didn't even mention the OPP, but you have all these intelligence people, and she says, well, they're various inputs. They're just inputs. They don't, But I would think that the head of the spy agency for this country would probably be a vitally important and weighted heavily intelligence input.
Well, it was very interesting because she kept challenging Miller's interpretation of the Emergencies Act in Section 2 of the CSIS Act. But as soon as she was asked a question that, according to her, a lawyer would be better suited for to answer, at that time, she wasn't a lawyer. At that time, she couldn't provide any legal understanding of anything.
And most importantly, you know what? She couldn't provide anything intelligible. That's exactly, it's not your jurisdiction, lady. I don't care what Justin Trudeau tells you. So just stay in your lane. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. And just to end it on that, one last clip number 8, once again, from Brendan Miller's cross-examination of Jody Thomas, this witness that we just saw. Brendan Miller went hard on this lady's story, and I think afterwards, when he saw that the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom lawyer Rob Kittredge wasn't asking the exact question that he wanted him to ask, he stood up, walked over, and whispered a question in his ear. And let's take a look at clip number 8.
Yeah, I've never seen anyone do that in there.
We heard from every law enforcement official, as well as we have the statements from CSIS and evidence, that they didn't have reasonable suspicion that any of this was taking place. So I take it that you can agree with me that you didn't have any evidence with you before cabinet or even considered of any espionage or sabotage against Canada that is detrimental to the interests of Canada or activities directed towards or in support of such espionage or sabotage, right?
That's been discussed, yes.
Right. And so that there was no evidence of that you considered in your assessment. And you could agree with me that there's no evidence of foreign influenced activities within or related to Canada that are detrimental to the interests of Canada, are clandestine or deceptive, or involve a threat to any person, correct?
There were threats to people.
Right. By email and Twitter, right?
I would submit that in the social media era, you cannot ignore threats against officials and public office holders just because they are on social media. That would be inexcusably negligent.
Right, but that's up to the police to deal with, or is that a national emergency?
It depends on the situation in the context in which those threats arrive.
I highly suggest that everyone go online, write CSIS Act Section 2, and read what a threat to national security is. Take a look at that. You'll actually be able to hear what she's saying right here does not corroborate what Section 2 of the CSIS Act actually is. And that goes once again to my point that she doesn't seem to value CSIS a lot. She prefers to do her own research, her own investigation, even though that's not her mandate, as she just admitted in the clip that we just saw, and disregards CSIS intelligence. Last word to you, Celine, then Tom, and then we'll wrap that up.
I share Tom's sentiment. Today was particularly hard to sit through. Specifically this morning, listening to the 3 deputy finance ministers. But I feel like I was revived after Brendan Miller cross-examined him, and then particularly in the clip that we just watched. It was very uplifting. Again, to hear these people who don't really even know a whole heck of a lot about their own job. I mean, I don't expect them to know a lot about what actually went on when the convoy was here, about any of the blockades. So I guess it's just that, I want to end it on something optimistic as well. So I think that this definitely has been it's opened a lot of eyes for Canadians, for myself as well. I definitely share that sentiment. I think this is why, as a younger person, I can speak to the fact that they don't really do anything in schools to primarily usher people that are young to get into politics or to be interested in politics. In fact, I can say I was deterred from them at a very young age because they made it so heinous and hard to understand when, judging from what I see in this room, the commission, actually, to be more specific, it's very simple. And I would usher anyone of any age, but primarily if we have anyone of a younger audience, if you're not sure about any of these things, do your research, get involved, make choices, be able to like lend your voice towards a side that's going to be able to project what you want to see go on in your country, because I don't think anyone likes what they're seeing right now. And that goes for anyone, regardless of where you stand in position to the convoy in Ottawa. So I'll pass it off to Tom from there.
All right.
Well, just before we get on to you, Tom, earlier we saw one of the witnesses talk about the fact that they didn't want the families of the people that got their assets frozen to be impacted. I know that your family was impacted by the fact that your assets were frozen. So if you could also just touch on that, that would be great.
Yeah. So one of my children has a very severe heart condition, multiple open heart surgeries, right? Needed medication. My son, he doesn't reside with me. And during the Emergency Act, when my bank accounts, my credit cards, everything that had my name on it was frozen, my credit card was on file with the pharmacy. And so we couldn't get his heart medication. Okay, what did my son have to do with what the banks watched on CTV or Global or one of these, and then decided that it would be okay for them to go after all of my financial assets? Those are my assets. I earn those, and those are mine. And here's the thing. To this day, there was never a warrant for my arrest. I've never been charged. I've never been convicted. I don't own a truck. I didn't violate a horn injunction. What I did during the convoy was to try my best to work with law enforcement to make sure that that convoy was responsible and safe. And they decided that they didn't want to hear from Canadians because, as we said, it's still to this day, we don't know when they determined that it was illegal or why or how they did it. They just say that it's illegal, but they never really justified or proved that it was legal. They certainly have never met the threshold of Section 2 of CSIS. So how is it that now all of a sudden my son's life is put in jeopardy? And this is what every Canadian in this country, whether you supported the convoy or not, should know, that if you disagree with this government right now, they will take extraordinary measures, because now they've set the precedent to do it. Now they've actually created this situation where the next time you, for example, refuse to have sex with your boss, right? This is what we're talking about. It's not about COVID. This has always been about following the law, about informed consent, and about your right to choose what is right for you in bodily autonomy. And, they brought up the rule of law. And Brennan asked her what she meant by the rule of law. But here's the thing. If you tell truth to power and you disagree with that, the onus now on the victim is to somehow be the one who corrects their behavior. And I know it's a very crude and disgusting comment about having sex with your boss, but we're living in a world that if you don't do what the authorities in this country tell you, you're the one who are going to suffer for it.
Mm-hmm.
I lost my job because I questioned the mandates, not because I refused to get it, but because I questioned it.
Exactly.
No.
This is the world we live in, and this leadership starts at the top and it works all the way down through this government and at every political level in this country. And we're in trouble.
Yeah.
We are desperately in this trouble.
And that's why we can't let it happen again. As Canadians as a whole, we have to stand together, stand on guard for the.
Yes.
I said that today when the finance deputy ministers talked about how the Canadian reputation was ruined with the US. I just reminded people that the past 2 years we didn't stand for a whole lot, but it was Canadians that made this happen, that brought the convoy together after the federal government locked people down for almost 2.5 years. in total, convinced them that their friends, families, and neighbors would get them sick so that they would be okay with locking themselves in their houses. And that's just to the degree that they went this time. So just to retort what Tom says, what would happen if we allowed them that ability again, if we consented, if we gave in to the fear and the propaganda that they spread? Not a whole lot of good. So
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for coming on tonight. You also spoke about, illegal. Everyone watching, you had 2 homeworks tonight. Go read Section 2 of the CSIS Act online, and also check out the Riot Act, and check out what the Riot Act does. What is the purpose of the Riot Act? And here you've got some interesting information as well. So Section 2 of the CSIS Act and also the Riot Act. Go check that out tonight. Thank you to everyone who's been joining us. I know it's pretty late tonight. Thank you to the people behind the camera. Thank you, Celine, for being here today. Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Tom. And we will see you all again tomorrow.
All right. See you. Thank you.